One person is dead, another seriously injured after a vehicle collides with a bus shelter in Pickering. We're live at that scene with the very latest.
And we now have a suspect in that hit and run at Toronto Metropolitan University yesterday afternoon. We continue our coverage live from the campus this hour.
Plus, a deadly double shooting in Riverdale leaves residents shaken. The victims believed to be in their 20s and the suspects still at large.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. We are following a developing situation in Durham region where police say a female is dead and another person is in serious condition after a vehicle crashed into a bus shelter in Pickering.
Let's go live to CP24's Phil Perkins, who's at the scene. Phil.
Bakari, this is devastating stuff. I've been doing this for about 12 years now. I haven't seen a crash that's like this in quite some time. We're here just off Kingston Road and Brock. The scene is right behind us here. And you can just take a look at the devastation here and just the only word that comes up to me, the flukiness out of all of this. So what you're looking at now is a Durham Regional Transit Pulse bus shelter that is hanging on by a thread right now after a car, according to Durham Regional Police, lost control. It was heading westbound on Kingston Road, mounted the curb, smashed through the bus shelter, somehow not hitting the Durham Regional Transit bus. It was at that position at the time of the crash. So it didn't hit the bus, didn't hit any of the poles, didn't hit the garbage container. It just went straight through the bus shelter itself, hitting two people. You can actually see, I don't know if they're their shoes or not, but we see what looks like 1.5 pairs of shoes. Two shoes that may belong to the 26-year-old male victim who sustained serious injuries. They're at a trauma center right now in Toronto. And then what looks like an all-black, potentially woman's shoe that is on Kingston Road here, along with shattered glass everywhere. The woman was taken also en route to a Toronto trauma center, but police tell us that she was vital signs absent, meaning nothing. They got no readings from her. They called Orange Ambulance to come pick her up, and they did so not on a regional street here. No, they lowered the helicopter on the 401 and on White's on the express lanes. And so the helicopter picked up the woman. They were en route to the Toronto Trauma Center, and that's when she succumbed to her injuries. A little bit more on this crash here, where there's no other injuries here. We don't know the age of the woman or the name, we do know that at this point there's no relation between the male and female victim. There was more to this crash as well. An elderly couple, they were in a Honda Civic. They were rear-ended by the suspected vehicle. I spoke with the woman. Okay. They told me that they are fine. They got banged around a little bit inside their vehicle, but they're okay. The vehicle that was responsible for this crash, it looks like it's a Chevy Cruze. It was white, black tinted windows, serious front-end damage. The windshield has been smashed. They appear to be cooperating with police on this crash. Police telling us that at this point they're looking at everything to see what may have caused this crash. They're going to look at speed as well as a medical to see what may have caused this. Here's Durham Regional Police and what they told us thus far.
There were two people that were standing at that bus shelter that were struck by the vehicle. From there, one female was transported via ambulance till about White's and the 401 when she went VSA. At that point, a decision was made to call Air Orange. Air Orange did land on the 401 with the intent to continue the transport. However, the female did die on the way to the hospital. The second male does have serious injury and is currently in a trauma center in Toronto.
And we asked officer, of course, this is something that's coordinated with Durham Regional Police and Orange, but, they were on their way to Toronto Trauma Center in the ambulance. Did calling the air ambulance get in the way? Maybe put this woman in a situation where it prolonged the treatment and led to her dying of her injuries. Of course, that is something they're not going to know right now, but obviously if they're going to be on a helicopter, they'll probably get to that trauma center a bit quicker. But nonetheless, we don't know much about the female victim at this point in time. We do understand the next of kin are being notified, so they're not giving us any details on who she is. Also, no details on the driver that unfortunately is at the cause of this crash and what happened, but they are cooperating with police. So again, once you get any more updates, you'll hear from us first on CP24. Back to you guys.
Okay, so those two people were standing at the bus shelter when they were struck. Just a horrible story. Phil, thanks so much for this. To another horrible story now. Police have identified a suspect in a hit and run at Toronto Metropolitan University.
As CP24's Beatrice Vaisman joins us live with the latest details. Beatrice, you were at Toronto Police headquarters when they were making the announcement about the suspect.
I was, and we've learned a little bit more information, Bakari and Lena, about what actually happened. It was just before 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon along Nelson Mandela Walk behind me that we know that these victims were sitting on a bench, actually. That's according to police. When the vehicle, driven by a now identified suspect, you'll see his photo in a second, the vehicle drove through this bench, striking 3 people, 4 people injured in total. So one person seemingly injured in the scramble or the melee in the aftermath, but 3 people actually struck by the vehicle, including the intended target. Police very clear. They do believe this was an intended and targeted attack. I want to show you the person police allege is responsible for this situation here at TMU campus yesterday. His name is Ryan Petroff. He is 23 years old. Police saying that he should be considered dangerous. If you see him, do not approach him. Neither he nor the vehicle he was allegedly driving at the time of this incident have been located by police, but they're appealing to the public for information. Here's more of what we heard from the inspector from 51 Division earlier this afternoon.
The vehicle involved in this incident was a green 4-door Honda with stolen license plates. At this time, we have not yet located the vehicle. I understand there's significant interest in the circumstances that led to this violent incident. What I can confirm is that individuals at the scene were able to identify Mr. Petroff as the suspect. To protect the identity of the victim, we are not commenting on the nature of the relationship.
And you heard the inspector there talking about the vehicle, a green 4-door Honda Accord, stolen license plate. The license plate, again, if you didn't catch it on our broadcast yesterday, Delta Echo, Delta Zulu 565. These were stolen plates, police allege. When it comes to the suspect, Bakari and Lena, he is already going to be facing a slew of charges in relation to this incident. 2 counts of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing bodily harm, assault with a weapon, possession of stolen property, failed to remain at the scene of an accident. We also have learned he's going to be charged with 2 counts of fail to comply with probation, which means that Ryan Petroff was previously convicted on 2 counts. We're waiting to hear from the parole board what those 2 counts were. So he's got a criminal past. And again, police saying he is to be considered dangerous. As for Toronto Metropolitan University, they have put out a statement this afternoon. It says, as an immediate measure to ensure pedestrians and public safety, planters have been placed at the main entrances to Nelson Mandela Walk, and the barriers have always been in place at Victoria and Bond Streets. The university is discussing with the City of Toronto what additional safety measures can be implemented to ensure pedestrian walkways used by TMU community members and public are safe while maintaining accessibility for emergency vehicles. We showed you just a moment ago some of the new planters installed here on TMU campus, but certainly an unnerving afternoon for everyone here on campus, and police now eager to find 23-year-old Ryan Petroff. Back to you.
Okay, reporting live from TMU's campus, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. Thank you, Beatrice. Well, right now it is 5:08. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa Intia Yabois. Good evening, Adj.
Oh, good evening, Bakari and Lena. And things have been very hectic out there on the major routes, and we are dealing with a problem. It's minor, but it's worth a mention. This is on the 401. It's on the collector ramp that takes you to the Allen North. It is the left lane of the ramp that's blocked. The good news, not really slowing down your commute. So always a sign that things aren't as bad as they should be. Headed towards the northbound lanes of the Don Valley Parkway, we still have this stop stall. It was a motorcycle, was in the right lane. They were blocking the right lane of the highway. It looks like everything just cleared over to the side. And unfortunately, it's a very, very slow go on the westbound guard. You're looking at very, very big delays starting from Cherry Street out to Park Lawn through Grand. That's because lanes have been reduced through this stretch for ongoing roadwork that started today. They've gone down from 4 to 3 lanes, and outside of camera view on the 400 southbound, just as you make your way through Fifth Line, crews on scene of a collision that is blocking the 2 right lanes. I'll send it back to you both.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
In other news, Toronto police are looking for 2 suspects following a deadly double shooting in Riverdale.
Officers responded to reports of gunshots on Bain Avenue near Logan shortly after 11 o'clock last night. They found that 2 people had been shot. One of the victims pronounced dead at the scene, while the other died after being taken to hospital.
I get the sense from just the firearms evidence here that the shots appear to be, clustered, which might suggest a targeting. I don't believe that this was a random act at this point.
Police have not identified the 2 people who were killed yet. Investigators only have a limited description of the suspects they're looking for. They're described as 2 males who were wearing dark clothing, and they were last seen running toward Withrow Park.
Okay, drivers, take note. There are now twice as many automated speed enforcement cameras spread out around Toronto.
CP24's Arda Zakarian joins us live with more on this. Is the city making progress on this front, Arda?
Well, we do have now 75 new speed cameras that are installed, bringing the total number in the city to 150. 25 of them will be permanently installed, and these are in community safety zones where there's been a history of speeding and crashes. Here's more from Mayor Chow.
It's not about money, it's not about revenue, it's about keeping people safe. It's about making sure our drivers obey the law of the land. Because if you obey the law, we're not going to give you a ticket. But if you choose to speed at a school zone, at a community safety zone, what does that mean? That means you are disregarding the lives of a bunch of kids.
So what do they look like? You can see it right now. That's the camera itself. They look like little gray mailboxes. Sometimes, there you go. That's what it looks like. So keep your eye out if you see one. But there was actually a notice for these speed cameras for 90 days before any of them were installed in the first place, notifying residents in the area. And if you're curious to see where these speed cameras are installed, the city does have a map for you to go and take a look at. Back in 2024, 12 of these cameras are vandalized, including the Parkside Drive one. If you remember, that one was sawed down 3 times. And some safety advocates have said that these speed cameras don't really work. It's more the road design, but there was a study done by Sick Kids that shows that these actually work. Back to you.
Okay, joining us live from the newsroom, TP24's Arda Zakarian. Arda, thank you very much. Right now, it is 5:13, 5 degrees. This is Live at 5.
It is back to business at Queen's Park, and the Ford government has announced more plans to improve interprovincial trade, while the opposition is sounding the alarm once again over Ontario Place. We'll walk you through all those developments coming up. Welcome back. The Ford government is trying to reduce interprovincial trade barriers in an effort to combat America's tariffs. And CP24's Lindsay Biscaya joins us with more on a partnership with 2 maritime provinces. Lindsay.
Yeah, so this act is called the Protect Ontario Through Free Trade Within Canada Act. So pretty self-explanatory by the name of the act. Basically trying to allow, goods and services to flow more freely throughout the borders of provinces and territories within this country. And not just goods, but also allowing people to work more easily if they come from one province and want to work more in another, especially healthcare professionals. This is all to allow for that to happen a little more quickly, a little more easily. So we know that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, met with the Premiers of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick today, and they started signing this. So it sounds as though many provinces and territories will be on board. For more, I want to bring in Michelle Wassilishin, a president and CEO of Ontario Craft Owners, for a little more insight. Michelle, it's good to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Hi, thank you.
I want to get your thoughts initially on this idea to kind of allow trade to flow more easily throughout the provinces and territories. Do you think this is going to benefit you?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. So it's unfortunate that it's taken a trade war to get us here. If you were talking to my members, I wasn't in this association 30 years ago, but they would tell you that they've been asking for this for 30 years. So I think it's really important. And I think that consumers and everyone really is starting to realize the benefit of building our own domestic and Canadian capabilities.
And I know, with this coming into effect, you'll be able to sell your product in other provinces, but other provinces will be able to sell wine in Ontario. And we know that the Premier said he's going to kind of hammer out the details as this goes forward. But are there any concerns that this could potentially hurt your business if people are looking for Canadian-made wine and then maybe not necessarily going for Ontario-made wine?
No, and we understand that, but we are, so I represent about 120 VQA wineries in Ontario. We are a made in Ontario success story. When you buy a VQA wine, you are buying a wine that is 100% grown and crafted in Ontario. The same thing in BC and other provinces with their VQA symbol. So we are very much in favor of a Canadian system. We very much welcome BC wines here. It's a little bit difficult when you look at the reciprocal agreements. So Canadian wines and Ontario wines are not as prominent in the BC market. And so we definitely would be looking for the premiers to negotiate to ensure that those agreements are reciprocal. But all in all, we believe that a strengthened Canadian market definitely helps our sector, and I think that's probably across the board what you're hearing from every sector right now.
Well, that's good news. And I'm assuming with the threat of more U.S. tariffs looming, obviously this has been uneasy for a lot of business owners. I'm assuming that you feel that unease a little bit too. Does a move like this today by the Ontario government and other premiers kind of signing on, does that help to alleviate some of that anxiety maybe for you?
We don't have a lot of anxiety simply because we're a little bit different. And so we actually don't export a lot of wine to the U.S. And that's because the U.S. has such a big capability of their own. So my members would more so be exporting into Asia, Nordic countries, and that sort of thing. And so, the funny thing is that it is more difficult for my members to sell to Quebec than it is to Sweden, Norway, Japan. I had some members, the other week in Singapore. And so it's more difficult to get our wines in Quebec, which is obviously a really important market for us, given the proximity, than it is for those other international markets. So a little bit different for us because we don't really sell into the U.S., but Canada is the U.S.'s biggest market to export their wine to. And so definitely, I think they're feeling the pinch. But for us, it's just a big opportunity. What we need is for consumers to follow suit. I was at Restaurants Canada convention last week. We need restaurants to have more Ontario wines within their restaurants. And I think we're getting there. I think we're actually getting there. This is a really huge, important time for us. And it's baby steps, but it's definitely going in the right direction, and it is very exciting.
Okay, well, such great news. Michelle, really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. So there you go, Lena and Bakari. Apparently, the premiers, want full free trade within Canada by Canada Day of this year. So just a couple of months to really get that up and running. Back to you. Okay,
joining us live from the newsroom, CP24's Lindsay Biscath. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, the group, Ontario Place for All, has called a community meeting tonight, following a New York Times investigation into ThermoSpa's bidding process.
Yeah, that report claims the company misrepresented itself as it worked to secure the deal at Ontario Place. For more on that meeting and the reaction, which was very swift, let's go live to CP24's Sija Liu. A lot of people are talking about this, Sija.
Yeah, it's definitely a talker. Well, this New York Times report is accusing the company, Therme, the luxury Austrian company, of exaggerating and boosting its company to mislead the Ontario government to secure a lucrative deal. Right now, Therme has a 95-year lease and a multi-billion-dollar deal with the Ontario government to redevelop Ontario Place and build a spa. But this New York Times report found that Therme exaggerated itself. It says that after looking through corporate filings and interviewing dozens of people involved in the company's operations, it concluded that Therme falsely presented itself as an industry player that had half a dozen spas across Europe, but in fact, it said it only had one spa in Romania. It also found that Therme's finances appeared to be shaky. It said the company was losing money and had less than 1 million euros in equity at the time it was pitching to Toronto. So Premier Doug Ford, he was faced with a lot of questions today on whether he was duped into making this deal with Therme. Here's what he had to say.
When I heard this allegation, I went directly to the minister and to the deputy and said, here, look into this. But now I understand they're all one company. So one bought the other company. So I guess they're a larger, stronger company. But they're going to look into this allegation and find out and make sure that all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted.
And this New York Times investigation also follows a report from the province's Auditor General that found that the price for this spa went up $1.8 billion. Here's some more reaction from some of the opposition leaders today on this latest report from New York Times.
New Democrats, we've been on this since day one. We knew there was something there that didn't smell right. Now, I heard the Premier say today that he's going to take a look at the Therme deal to see if it passes the smell test. Well, I'll save him some time. It doesn't. Just cancel the deal.
And this latest report will be discussed at a community meeting tonight at the Ronsvale United Church. It's hosted by the group Ontario Place for All. It takes place between 7 to 9, and we'll bring you an update from that later on. Back to you.
All right, CJ, thanks so much for this. We'll take you to Montreal now, where the French leaders' debate begins in less than an hour with the Debate Commission rescinding its invitation to the Green Party to take part.
The French language debate is scheduled to take place at 6 o'clock in just over half an hour in Montreal. So the Greens, they have been removed from the English language debate as well tomorrow. The commission says because the party intentionally reduced the number of its candidates, it no longer meets the intention of the participation criteria. The commission says that the Greens are only running 232 candidates for strategic reasons. Tonight's debate was moved up to an earlier time due to the Montreal Canadiens' final regular season game, their last chance to clinch a playoff spot.
The commission itself admitted in its letter that we received this morning at 7:20 that their decision infringes on our freedom of expression, but more importantly, that it infringes on the right of Canadians to be informed when they go to the poll and make their decision about who will lead this country moving forward. But somehow they decided that what matters most here isn't a fair debate. It's a debate, the one that they're trying to create, that protects the status quo.
And the Green Party says it hopes the commission reverses its decision and allows them to take part in these debates.
And heading into the first leaders debate tonight, the latest Nanos research poll for CTV News and the Globe and Mail shows Liberal leader Mark Carney inching closer to 50% support when it comes to who should be prime minister.
While Carney is up slightly to 49.4%, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is down by a couple of points to 32.6%. Jagmeet Singh with the NDP is up slightly to 4.2%.
And when it comes to overall party support, the Liberals' lead over the Conservatives has grown a little bit to more than 7%. The NDP is down slightly to 8.3% support.
It's now 5:24, 6 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
Masai Ujiri faces the media after another less than successful season. More from the Raptors president as he looks ahead to what's next. It's coming up.
Welcome back. Raptors president Masai Ujiri held his end-of-season news conference today, and he was asked how he feels the team's rebuild is going after missing out on the playoffs once again.
Generally, I think the organization, we see some changes coming. The reactions, I think everybody has been incredible from top to bottom, and we're appreciative of this opportunity to rebuild this team and try to go get better and go somewhere.
And the Raptors ended the season with a loss to the San Antonio Spurs. That was Sunday. They finished the campaign with a 30-52 record, failing to make the playoffs for the third straight season. And Toronto has the 7th best odds to win the NBA draft lottery, which is going to be held May 12th.
5:28 now, 6 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And we're following developments out of Pickering, where a person has died, another person seriously injured after a vehicle collides with a bus shelter. A person's dead, another person seriously injured after a vehicle collides with a bus shelter. This is in Pickering. We're live at the scene with the very latest.
And Doug Ford is one step closer to tariff-proofing Ontario. We'll tell you more about new legislation meant to reduce internal trade barriers in the midst of a heated trade war with the White House.
And also this evening, the PCs are grilled about a bombshell media investigation, which accuses Therma of misrepresenting itself to land a contract in Toronto. And there's a community meeting about this tonight.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, I'm Lena Latafat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. We're following a developing situation in Durham region. This is where police say that a woman's dead, another person's in serious condition. This is after a vehicle crashed into a bus shelter in Pickering.
Let's go live to CP24's Phil Perkins on scene. And Phil, we're learning from police those two people were at the bus shelter.
Right, that's right, Lena. So yeah, let's paint a picture of like what is happening behind us here, and just showing you what we're looking at. So we're just at on the westbound lanes on Kingston Road, just by Brock here in Pickering. You're seeing a Durham Regional Transit bus shelter completely gone. It is hanging on just by the posterior wall here. It was shattered, but what looks like a Chevy Cruze sedan. We heard from Durham Regional Police. They told us that around 2 o'clock this afternoon that sedan lost control. It was going westbound on Kingston Road and somehow mounted the curb, did not hit a traffic pole, did not hit a hydro pole, did not hit the bus, which is in the spot it is right now that it was during the crash. It only went through the bus shelter. Now, we understand a man and a woman were in the area. Were they in the bus shelter? Were they getting on or off the bus? It is not clear, but they were in the area. They were on the street and they were hit directly by the vehicle. You can see some of the damage here, not just the glass, but also shoes, which may or may not belong to the victims. I see a pair of Nike sneakers here that could be from the 26-year-old male victim, and an all-black sneaker potentially for the female victim. The Chevy Cruze then rear-ended a Honda Civic, which had an elderly couple in it. They're okay. I spoke with the passenger. They're a little banged up, but they're fine. They're talking. The Chevy Cruze then came to a rest about a couple hundred meters down from where we are standing. We understand they're cooperating with police. We don't know what caused this, whether it was a medical or speeding. All those factors are being looked at. Both victims were en route in separate ambulances to Toronto trauma centers. The male in a Toronto trauma center right now. As for the woman, this is what Durham Regional Police said about her situation.
They were transporting her to a Toronto area trauma center. En route to that trauma center, she became VSA inside the ambulance. The decision was made to call Air Orange in. The decision to land was, I'm not sure whose decision that would have been, but the decision to land was made to land on the 401 to continue the transport. However, she did die on the way to the hospital.
And so again, we had eyes on that chopper as it landed on the 401 at White's, but we do understand that at no point was the woman actually boarding the chopper. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she made it on the orange ambulance. Send it back to you guys.
Okay, CP24's Phil Perkins live in Pickering. Phil, thank you. Well, police have now identified a suspect in a hit and run at Toronto Metropolitan University.
CP24's Beatrice Faisman joins us live with the latest details. Beatrice, it's been a really unsettling week on campus.
It has been, Lena and Bakari. Just 24 hours ago, this walkway behind me, Nelson Mandela Walk, was a crime scene after police alleging a 23-year-old man intentionally drove a vehicle through this pedestrian walkway, striking 3 people who were sitting on a bench. In total, 4 people were injured, 2 were taken to hospital. Thankfully, it sounds like everyone's going to make a full recovery. We also learned today that the intended target, according to police, the intended victim, was in fact struck by the vehicle as well, but again, is going to be okay. Now police have put out the photograph of 23-year-old Ryan Petroff of Toronto, the person they are looking for. They say if you see him, do not approach. He should be considered dangerous. We've also learned Mr. Petroff, previously known to police, amongst his charges that he's going to be facing is 2 counts of breach of probation, which means that he has previously been convicted of at least 2 different crimes, Lena and Bakari, at least 2 different counts. Also, police revealing a bit more information about the vehicle he was driving. We now know it was a dark green Honda Accord sedan with a cracked windshield, but we also learned today that the license plates of that vehicle were stolen. And again, that license plate for you, in case you didn't mark it down yesterday, Delta Echo Delta Zulu 565. As for people here on campus, certainly an unnerving 24 hours. TMU has put out a statement. It says, as an immediate measure to ensure pedestrian and public safety, planters have been placed at the main entrances to Nelson Mandela Walk, and barriers have always been in place at Victoria and Bond Streets. The university is discussing with the City of Toronto what additional safety measures can be implemented to ensure pedestrian walkways used by TMU members, community members, and the public are safe while maintaining accessibility for emergency vehicles. The inspector at 51 Division commented on safety here on campus, and here's what we get to say about the collaboration between Toronto Police and TMU.
It's understandable in an incident like this that people may be concerned as towards what could happen in the future. We work very strongly with TMU and their management when it comes to making the place safer on a day-to-day basis, and we will continue to work with our partners at TMU to look at strategies that we can use to advance safety at that location.
Thankfully, we heard from police yesterday that there were no students or staff from TMU who were directly impacted in terms of physical injury from this incident, but certainly the emotional toll that it takes, it makes people very, very nervous, and understandably so. And so police now anxious to find 23-year-old Ryan Petroff. They said to him, if you are listening, contact a lawyer and turn yourself in. Back to you.
All right, Beatrice Faisman live on TMU campus tonight. Beatrice, thanks so much for this. 5:37 now, 6 degrees. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and Siayabwa, and that drive, no doubt, very busy tonight, Adj.
Oh, super duper busy. You name the route, you're dealing with volume delays or a problem. So we'll start where problems are, but the delays aren't too bad. So this is the southbound lanes of the 400 to south of Finch. It's a stalled transport truck. Heavy tow is on scene. Center lane is blocked. This happened moments ago, so they're just starting to see volumes increase in terms of the backlog just on the approach. Also getting word of some problems, have not spotted it yet, but MTO reporting issues on the 401 westbound just past James Snow Parkway. Reports of a stalled vehicle that does have the center lane blocked. Definitely there because this delay into Milton, very slow on those westbound lanes. Northbound on the Don Valley Parkway still have this stall. It's off to the side. It wasn't motorcycles. You can't really see the motorcycle, but you see the emergency crews partially in that right lane, so that's adding to your slow commute. Outside of camera view, we continue to deal with this collision on the southbound 400 up at 5th Line in Bradford. It is the 2 right lanes that are blocked. And a reminder, because of that vehicle which ended up driving into that bus shelter, we have that stretch of Kingston Road closed between Brock Road and Valley Farm. I'll send it back to you both.
Okay, thanks a lot, Adj.
You're welcome.
Well, the Ford government says that phase 2 of construction on the Gardiner Expressway, it's way ahead of schedule, and it actually could be finished by January.
Yeah, drivers, you'll certainly like this. This phase of rehabilitation work on the Gardiner has been in full swing since November 2023. The original completion date was April 2027, but the province says it'll now be much sooner.
It's been going great. When we originally stepped in with a provincial investment of an additional $73 million, the goal was to get it decreased by a year. And we've seen great progress on that. We just were informed just a couple of days ago that next week we'll be shifting to the last 2 remaining lanes. So that means we're about 15 months ahead of schedule already on that project. And that's what happens when we're working together with the city as well as implementing 24/7 construction on it as well. So it's been a great success story, and we're going to get Toronto moving as quickly as possible, recognizing how important that stretch of the Gardiner is to getting people into the city.
And work on the westbound Gardiner between Park Lawn and Grand Avenue began today, reducing traffic from 4 lanes just to 3. The eastbound lanes have also been narrowed. An official update on the progress of Gardiner construction, that's expected next week.
Well, the Ford government is trying to reduce interprovincial trade barriers. This is in an effort to combat U.S. tariffs.
The CP24's Lindsay Biscaya joins us live with more on a partnership with 2 maritime provinces. Lindsay.
Yeah, 2 so far, hoping to get more on board. Lena and Bakari, and as chair of the Council of the Federation, this is something that Doug Ford has kind of been spearheading. So it's called the Protect Ontario Through Free Trade Within Canada Act. So it's a bit of a long name, but it kind of encompasses the entire point of this act that Premier Doug Ford really wants. And it's more about making trade within provinces and territories easier, kind of eliminating those barriers so that Canadians can access and buy Canadian across the whole country. So we know, as you mentioned, Doug Ford met with his counterparts from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick today, and both those premiers are now signing the free trade agreements with Ontario. Here's more from the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, today talking about that. Take a listen.
Across the country, internal trade barriers increase the cost of everyday goods and services by nearly 15%. You talk about tariffs, my goodness, we've been tariffing each other, it seems, for decades, generations actually. They reduce our national GDP by more than 7% and cost our economy up to $200 billion every single year. In other words, much like President Trump's tariffs, these trade barriers hurt our economy, drive away jobs and investment, and divide us from each other.
So this act would encompass a lot of different things. We're talking about labor laws as well as alcohol sales, like rules applying to alcohol sales. Also, when it comes to healthcare professionals and other workers, it allows healthcare professionals, for example, in BC, who want to come work in Ontario, it allows them to start working immediately. It makes it easier for people to move around and continue to work, as well as electricians. And we spoke with an Ontario winemaker today who said that she's incredibly happy with the idea of this act. Take a listen.
We are very much in favor of a Canadian system. We very much welcome BC wines here. It's a little bit difficult when you look at the reciprocal agreement. So Canadian wines and Ontario wines are not as prominent in the BC market. And so we definitely would be looking for the premiers to negotiate to ensure that those agreements are reciprocal. But all in all, we believe that a strengthened Canadian market definitely helps our sector, and I think that's probably across the board what you're hearing from every sector right now.
So in the face and kind of the shadow of those looming U.S. tariffs or additional tariffs, Lena and Bakari, sounds as though many business owners on board with this idea. 2 premiers, as we mentioned, have signed on, but the goal is to have full free trade across Canada by Canada Day this year. So not a lot of time, just a couple months away. Back to you.
All right, Lindsay Biscaya live in our newsroom. Thanks for this, Lindsay. Well, the group Ontario Place for All has called a community meeting tonight following a New York Times investigation into Therma Spa's bidding process. Now, that report claims the company misrepresented itself as it worked to secure the deal at Ontario Place.
For more on this, let's go live to CP24, Sija Liu. Sija.
Lena Bakari, this New York Times report is alleging that Therma, the Austrian luxury spa company, is not who they say they are. It says that the company exaggerated its company and misled the Ontario government in order to secure a lucrative deal. Right now, Therma has a 95-year lease and a multi-billion-dollar deal to redevelop Ontario Place, which includes building a spa. But this New York Times report says it interviewed dozens of people involved with the company and looked through corporate filings and found that the company falsely presented itself. It said that it pitched itself as an industry player, a global company that operated more than 6 spas in Europe, but in fact, it had only operated 1 spa in Romania. It also found that Thermaea's finances appeared to be shaky, that the company was losing money at the time it pitched to Toronto and only had less than $1 million in equity at the time. So Premier Doug Ford, he was faced with some tough questions today on whether he was tricked or misled into this deal with Therma. Here's what he had to say.
I just want to double and triple check the contract and make sure, anything that was said in the story from the Times. We'll look into it and make sure everything passes the smell test.
Now, this latest report also expands on concerns brought up by the province's Auditor General. It found last year that the cost for Therma Spa had ballooned to over $1.8 billion and that the bidding process for the property also wasn't fair. Here's more of some reaction from opposition leaders following this latest concern from the New York Times report.
We know that Premier Ford always pitches himself as a very shrewd businessman, but let me tell you, this is not a shrewd deal, and he may have been played. My biggest concern was there was no process, no due diligence, and no real competition, quite frankly, because any of the deals, according to the process, could have been selected. We know that the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner called the process unfair and flawed.
All of these concerns will be discussed tonight at a community meeting from 7 to 9 p.m. at Roncesvalles United Church. Lena Bakari. It's hosted by the group Ontario Place for All.
Okay, CP24, Sija, Sija, thanks a lot. It's 5:45, 6 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, if you are driving above the speed limit in this city, the chances of getting a ticket, they've now increased. We'll explain next.
Well, drivers, take note. Lena, there are now twice as many automated speed enforcement cameras spread out around Toronto.
I feel attacked. CP24's Arda Zakarian joins us live with more on this. Can you believe you just called me out like that, Arda?
Have you been in the car with her, Arda? I have.
I haven't seen either of you drive, so it's all up for debate. Bakar, you can't say anything. Come on. I feel like you're going to come for me too. But anyway, let's talk about the speed cameras. So 75 of these new speed cameras have been installed across the city in different areas, bringing the total number of these speed cameras to 150. 25 of them will be permanently installed, and these are in community safety zones, areas that are known to have crashes and speeding. Here's more from Barbara Gray, General Manager for Transportation Services.
We have sort of a hybrid approach to the permanent locations in places where we know that we have a very persistent speeding problem. And then we still do have those that do rotate to various places in the community. And there has been vandalism. That's absolutely true. But we believe that there's value in having those that move around, the mobile ones as well. And so we're going to keep working with our vendors on good solutions to help to deter that vandalism, and then continue to look at both approaches.
Speaking of that vandalism, 12 of those cameras in 2024 were vandalized, including the one on Parkside Drive. If you remember, that one was sawed down 3 times. If you're wondering what these speed cameras look like, it looks like a gray mailbox right there. So keep your eye out if you see one of those. Now, each of these speed cameras had a sign on them for 90 days saying that there was going to be a speed camera installed right here. So it gave the residents enough time, enough notice to know what's happening in that place, enough for people to be mindful and slow down if they need to. Now, there is a map that the City of Toronto has, so you can see where these speed cameras are. And some safety advocates have been saying that it's about the road design as well. The city, of course, is looking into that, but a recent study by Sick Kids shows that these speed cameras actually work. Back to you.
All right, that's good to know. Arda, thanks so much for this. Well, the Bank of Canada is keeping its key interest rate unchanged.
The central bank is holding the rate steady at 2.75%. Today's decision to stand pat, this comes after 7 consecutive rate cuts. The move also comes amid economic uncertainty due to the trade war with the U.S. The Bank of Canada is scheduled to announce its next interest rate decision June 4th.
The dramatic protectionist shift in U.S. trade policy and the chaotic delivery have increased uncertainty, roiled financial markets, diminished global growth prospects, and increased inflation expectations. The path for U.S. trade policy remains highly unpredictable. There's also considerable uncertainty about the impacts of a trade war on our economy.
Financial planner Alan Small says he believes the bank will make more interest rate cuts in the months ahead, despite its decision to press pause today.
I think interest rates will come down this year further. I just think this is a pause. If you think about how many meetings the Bank of Canada has, how many interest rate setting meetings they'll have, they're not going to cut at every meeting. And it just made sense for them to pause now with a lot of uncertainty. For those that are renewing their mortgage or looking to buy a home and take a mortgage out, obviously, interest rates are a lot lower than they were just a year ago. They will go lower, but I don't think they're going to move as quickly as they have been moving.
It's 5:52, 6 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, the Maple Leafs have clinched the Atlantic Division title, setting the stage for an interprovincial first round in the postseason. We're going to tell you more next.
It'll be the Battle of Ontario in the first round of the NHL playoffs.
Here's Matthews back with a second from they score! Mitch Marner's.
Toronto clinching its first Atlantic Division title with a 4-0 win in Buffalo last night. The Leafs will take on the Senators in the first round of the playoffs. It's the first postseason meeting between the rivals since 2004. It's been a while. Toronto has won all 4 playoff meetings with Ottawa. That's interesting. The Leafs will play their final regular season finale at home tomorrow against the Red Wings.
And to help tee up this first round of the postseason, we're joined live by John Viveros, host of Hot Take Hockey on YouTube. JV, good evening. So we have to also talk about, the historical battle that is the Battle of Ontario matchup.
For sure, Bakari. And as Lena already mentioned, they have success against the Senators in the playoffs. The Leafs have owned the Ottawa Senators in the playoffs. So don't want to get too ahead of yourself going into the series if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan or representing the organization. But the success is there. But this is, of course, a new core for both organizations. And I think when you do look at the history, they're 16-8. I think the Leafs hopefully can hold on to that positive side of history, because in other aspects in the playoffs, whether it's against other teams or just in more recent memory, it is easy to look at that history and down on yourself. So I think when you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Ottawa Senators, it hasn't gone great in the regular season recently. They've lost their last 5 games in the regular season against the Ottawa Senators. Specifically this season, they're 0-3 against the Ottawa Senators. So the Sens actually have the Leafs number with this current roster, but again, we're talking playoffs. It's very different when it comes to playoff hockey. The Leafs now have 4 players in the top 50 category for hits. They have been putting on the scoring. The Ottawa Senators don't have a single player that surpassed 30 goals this season. The Leafs have 3. So, of course, you saw it last night against the Buffalo Sabres. Austin Matthews gets his 400th career NHL goal. Mitch Marner gets his 100th career point. So there's a lot of milestones and a lot of confidence going into the playoffs this year.
You're painting a picture of a really interesting dynamic here. We're talking about a really well-seasoned team in the Toronto Maple Leafs. For Ottawa, this is their first playoff appearance in 8 years. It's been a while, so they're clearly the underdogs here. But if there's anything you've learned, I'm sure it is that you've got to watch the underdog.
100%. I think the Ottawa Senators, and again, it's the Battle of Ontario, so they're hungry. They look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and those first-round exits and the lack of success for Toronto, and Ottawa wants to continue that. They want to continue to be part of that story, and you see it so many times, Lena, and we'll maybe see it in this playoff series, is how Leaf fans travel, and that bugs the Ottawa Senators. That bugs the Sens on that side. So I think the underdog perspective, the fact that the Leafs fans do travel well, and the fact that the Sens have been so successful against Toronto in recent memory here, I think those all suggest that the Sens could be an underdog here and potentially an upset candidate. But I do, again, look on the other side in the Leaf success and also building towards that playoff success. As you said, the Ottawa Senators haven't been there in a while, so they've been building and rebuilding a new roster here. I will also say a new storyline here is both Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs really haven't had the goaltending in the last few years. And whether it's the Leafs' lack of success in the playoffs or the Sens not even being able to get there, now each team have a solidified goalie. Anthony Stolarz has won his last 8 games. He has a .950 save percentage in that stretch and a .926 on the season. And then on the other side, Linus Ullmark has a .911 save percentage. So both goalies are ready to go for this matchup. And Linus Ullmark, of course, has experience against the Toronto Maple Leafs, playing previously with the Boston Bruins and seeing the Leafs in the playoffs. So there's also a storyline there.
All right, so teeing everything up for postseason matchups. John Viveros, host of Hot Take Hockey on YouTube. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
It is now 5:58, 6 degrees, but it's feeling more like 1 out there. You're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.